Absolutely nothing beats windshield time. Welcome back to Dan the Road Trip Guy, a podcast where we have candid conversations about life lessons learned on the road. I'm your host, Bimmer enthusiast and road trip extraordinaire, Dan Neal. And now, on to the show. All right, my guest today is Rick Koehler. Best I can recall, we lived in the same neighborhood and our wives introduced us. I recall Linda saying, "Hey, I met this lady and her husband has track cars." And I was like, okay, enough said. I got to meet this guy. So Rick is and was an architect, ran his own firm from what I can get from his LinkedIn, but he's become quite the artist. And we'll talk about that during our episode, during this virtual road trip here in Cincinnati. On a personal level, Rick, I always remember Rick had this shop and he loaned us his shop space so we could prep a car that we were doing for one lap. And I'll never forget the note he wrote me, and we were collecting money for juvenile diabetes and he gave a donation. But in his note, he said, "Be sure to keep the shiny side up." And so I've always remembered that, and I still have that note. Welcome to the show, Rick.
Hi, Dan. How are you?
I'm good. And you?
Good. I'm fine. Thank you.
All right. We'll pretend we're tooling down the road together and just chatting in the car as we drive. I usually start this out, and you'll appreciate this one because I know you've been there many times. I usually say, well, it's not really an elevator pitch. Let's take a warm-up lap around favorite track of yours and mine, Mid-Ohio, and just who is Rick Koehler?
Yeah, Mid-Ohio. That brings back a lot of memories. Yeah, so, it is true what you say. My company was Architects Plus. I was involved. I was president and CEO of Architects Plus for 39 years. I retired about 4 years ago. I've been painting and I became really a full-time artist at that point in time. But before any of that and underneath any of that, I've always been a car guy. I think if you're one of those, quote, car guys, then it's just in your blood, it's in your DNA, and it's just something that is part of your daily life.
Yeah, for sure. And I've talked to a lot of car guys, and we'll go down the list of cars, and I'll be like, "And you hung on to that one, right?" And people will go, "No, I wish I had." We'll get to some of your cars, but
exactly. I've got one of those too. Yeah.
Yeah, and you've got a big family too. Always remember that from Christmas cards.
So I have 5 kids. I have 3 boys, 2 girls. I was fortunate enough we had children pretty early in life. My 2 older sons, Eric and Reed, got to race with me. Actually, high school graduation present for the 3 boys. I ran it by the girls, but they weren't interested. So for the 3 boys, with the 3-day skip arbor school.
Yeah.
And they got to pick the track. And of course, Dad had to go along. And of course, Dad had to have a car too.
Well, sure.
So it was a little bit self-aggrandizing, but it was a lot of fun. And my boys were always car guys. That garage that you were talking about, we hung out in and they hung out in as little kids. And I remember, cars being up on jack stands when we would be bleeding the brakes. And there's a 6-year-old sitting in the driver's seat telling him to pump the brake for me, and stuff. So yeah. We sort of indoctrinated them at an early age. But my 2 older boys, Eric and Reed, both ended up with 911 race cars. I have many photos of the 3 of us on the track at the same time, which are great, great memories.
Yeah, perfect memories. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Talking about cars, and this is a show somewhat about road trips, but tell us about your very first street car and what you remember about it.
So cool. It was actually a Christmas present from my dad. It was a 1966 Mustang that I got in 1968. It was an inline 6 with a 3-speed. I didn't care. I thought I was the coolest guy in the world. Had a very cool interior. It was some deluxe edition. It wasn't a normal interior. It was a navy blue hardtop with this sort of white and light blue interior. It was gorgeous. He bought that car used, 2 years old, for $1,000.
Wow.
I just thought it was so cool, and I loved it. I remember one time it was many things. It was not a snow car. So I had dropped a couple of pretty serious cinder blocks in the trunk. He's looking out at the car one time. It's parked in our driveway, and he says, "Hey, come here." He says, Have you been dropping the clutch on that car?" I said, No, why? He said, "Well, the back end's sitting kind of low." I said, "Well, that's because it has 80 pounds of concrete blocks back there." Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So I'll ask the question, we mentioned this earlier. I'll ask the same question I've asked just about everybody. You kept that car, right?
Yeah, no, the only one that and maybe we'll talk about it later, that there's one that I really wish I had kept. It was a BMW M6. It was a 1987 BMW M6. And I love that car. It was very cool. It wasn't a sports car. It was a gentleman, cruiser, if you will, kind of a luxury car. And I sold that one. That one is one I wish I kept. but you can't keep them all.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Moving from first car, any epic road trips, even when you were a kid, that just stand out in your mind and you go, wow, if I could do that again today, I'd do it in a heartbeat.
I went to Kent State. My wife, Sandy, went to Miami. We met on a blind date. It was 243 miles. I remember that. Made that trip back and forth many, many times in my last 2 years of school when we were dating. I was coming down one of the back roads in Ohio, getting there late in the evening. Headlights were on. In this little 2-lane road, they had introduced an island for some reason, a concrete island, which had never been there before. And I swerved. I mean, I didn't miss that island by an inch, I don't think. It was a 6-inch, lip coming at me. And if I would have hit that thing, it would have been an ugly evening. But I was able to miss it through the fog and everything else. But anyway, good memories going back and forth to Miami, to Oxford.
Oh, that's great. And so how long you been married? I don't really know that.
Yeah, 47 years.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So you mentioned you were an architect. You founded firm Architects Plus. And the thing I remember about Architects Plus, and you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, but driving up 71, this is long before we met, I always remembered that cool building over there on the southbound side of Architects Plus, unless I'm totally remembering incorrectly.
No, that's exactly correct. Yeah, that's exactly correct. And then do you remember 1999 when the tornado came through?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I got a call one day from one of my employees, and he's actually, my dad called me about 5:45 in the morning. He said, "Hey, you worried about the storm?" I said, "What? We're in Terrace Park. I'm sleeping, And then one of my employees called me about 6, and he said, "Rick, I think maybe our building got hit." So I got in my car and I put on the blue jeans and the boots and figured it was going to be a work day like that, moving boxes, whatever. I'm driving up the highway in my BMW M6. It's a beautiful day. I've got the sunroof open. I'm listening to WLW. And they're talking to a guy going down the highway, which is moving at about 15 miles an hour because of all the debris and branches and leaves and everything. And the guy on the radio, they're interviewing him. And he says, I'm going past that Architects Plus building. He says, remember that building? That building's gone.
Oh,
and
no.
I'm driving up to my building. And he said it twice. He said, that building's gone. I'm like, oh my gosh, so it hit us square. It hit us square. But yes, that's where we were.
Yeah. And did you always want to be an architect when you were a kid?
Yes.
What took you to be an architect?
Yes, I always wanted to be an architect. Little kid, I was always sketching and drawing. I'll be honest with you, back in the 7th and 8th grade, I was drawing cars, instead of paying attention in math class. Had some pretty cool cars. I don't know about my math grades, but my cars were pretty cool. Then when I got to high school, they had you had some electives, and one of them was mechanical drawing. And I took that, and I, did well in that class. It was just a path I knew I wanted to go down from very early age. Yes.
Yeah. Did you do commercial and residential, or one or the other?
We did. The firm did both. My business partner of 33 years, Mike LaValle, headed up the commercial studio, and another partner, and she headed up a commercial interiors studio. We never did residential interiors. We had too many residential interior designers that referred work to us, so we didn't want to cross that path. But we opened a commercial interior design studio, and Nora Wiley headed that studio up for us, and it was quite profitable for us.
No. Now, is the firm, I know you retired, is the firm still in existence?
It is. The two partners that I had at that time broke it apart. So one of them is called Luminat, which is the commercial side of the business, commercial architecture and interiors. The residential studio is headed up by Andy Schaub. So they both still exist, and I'm friends with both of them. We parted very amicably, and it was a buyout, worked out over years, but it's no longer one firm. It's now two firms.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great. This continues. Yeah. You've moved, I looked on your LinkedIn. It looks like you're artist. You said painting. I was afraid to say painting when we started. I thought people would be calling you to paint their house. So I always said artist. And so you started that. And how did you get into that?
I always wanted to see if I could paint. And I took two of my buddies to lunch that painted. One was, they were both contractors, actually. One was a residential contractor. One was a commercial contractor. And they both told me what to do and to get lessons and what to buy. And so I've painted for 9 years now. So I was painting before I, retired from architecture. Then I retired fully in May of 20. And at that point, I pretty much I've got a studio in my house on the second floor where I paint. I'm probably up here 4 or 5 days a week painting. I've painted 82 paintings so far this year. So that's tells you some volume.
Yeah.
So anyway, I thoroughly enjoy it. Been successful for me as a mini business venture, which I never ever thought it would be. And I have a passion for it. So I love it.
Yeah, that's great. Now, do you ever, I don't know how this works, but I know a guy who does racing art, and he'll reproduce, he'll sell the original for X number of dollars and then he'll reproduce. Do you do that, or do you just sell originals?
I only sell originals. My work, I've thought about painting cars and, close-ups of a Ferrari fender or a wheel or but my work is impressionistic. It's not, most of those guys, the work they do is called photorealistic, or at the very least realistic. And so they're going for precision. I'm going for loose, right? I'm trying to get loose edges, which has been probably my biggest challenge as an architect. You're taught to be tight and precise. And now I'm trying to be loose. And so that's been my struggle over these last 9 years. I don't paint cars. I paint landscapes and I will tractors and boats and seascapes and things like that. But I've never honed down to paint a view of a 911 or of a Ferrari looking on it or something like that.
Yeah, that's great though. We talked a little. No, we were going to talk about that. Talked about, and you sent me a long list of cars, and I so enjoyed that. It was the first time anybody had done that. I'm like, oh, this is cool, and I'm just reading down the list. So you looking down the list, you've owned some great cars, and you've mentioned a couple. But if you could go back and hang on to a couple of those, which ones would you hang on to? And did you hang on to any of them?
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. So I did own a 73 Camaro. That was a stick also, 4-speed, the Chevy 350. But it was at the time when there was a lot of emissions on those cars that the manufacturers, I think, were just basically slapping on because it was a government requirement. It always felt like it was just bogging down. It was just, it just never felt like it breathed very well.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a pretty car. Anyway, I was always kind of an American car guy. So then a buddy of mine, Mike Sweeney had a dealership up where on Kenwood Road, right where the mall sits today, Kenwood Town Center.
Okay.
And they had sent an over-the-road trailer to Florida with one of their guys who went down there to buy used cars and bring them back on this over-the-road hauler. Brought back 6 cars, and 2 of them were TR6s. So mine was a 76 TR6. Mine was white with a light brown interior. And then they brought back another one that was, I'll call it Mazda blue. I mean, it was blue and had a hardtop. And Mike's dad took that one, and I bought the white one. I didn't have a hardtop. The blue one had a hardtop. So I said to Mike, I said, look, if your dad ever goes to sell that car, will you call me up? I'll buy that hardtop from you. He's like, sure. So no kidding, about a year and a half, 2 years later, he calls me up. I still have the car. He said, hey, Rick, my dad's selling the car. You want the hardtop? Yeah. I went in there. I gave him $200 cash for the hardtop. Put it on his white car, drove it immediately to the paint shop and had them paint it TR6 white. That was a nice conversion for that car in the wintertime because those things were tough to keep warm, tough Cincinnati winters.
Sure.
But what was neat about the Triumph was I bought that thing for $6,000. I drove it for, 2.5 years, and I sold it for $7,000. And I'm like, well, this is pretty cool. I never, all the American cars were going down in value. And
exactly. Yeah.
I had one, not only did I break even, I made a little bit of money. And so that kind of brought me over to the dark side of looking at, that was a British car, but then I started looking at BMWs and 911s and things like that. And so that was kind of the tipping point for me, moving away from some of the American cars at that time.
That's cool. Yeah. Yeah, and I always, the TR6 brought back some memories. We used to have a car show there in Terrace Park when we lived over there for several years, and you were always gracious enough. Early Saturday morning, and you're driving the race cars down to the green, and that was always great for us.
Right, we did, yeah.
We talked a little bit about Mid-Ohio track cars. Skip Barber, you owned quite a few 911s, track cars, not street cars, in particular in this thought, but what got you into track days? So,
I had when I started doing track, I had my first 911 was a 77 911S, silver with a blue interior. It was cool. But I had a hankering for that wider body, so I bought an 85 911 Carrera. There still is a dealership as you're going up towards Oxford and you get off 275 and you go up, I think it's 127. If you take the first or second exit and go into Ross, there's a dealer there. He only sells used cars, but he sells low mileage, used Porsches, BMWs, high-end cars like that. Okay. I think my car was 2 years old and it had 2,400 miles on it when I bought it. And so it was a street car for me, but then I started doing driver's ed events and they were always at Mid-Ohio. I enjoyed the heck out of that, but kept the car very street, In fact, I'll tell you how dumb I was. I was so stupid. At one point, I said, well, I'm going to go faster on this this next time that I went up. We'd go up 3-4 times a year. And so I went out and bought new tires, thinking, well, they'll have better grip, right?
Sure.
Well, like down, and finally the light dawned on me. Hey, dummy, you need less, tread depth is a good thing. Less tread depth, not more, So then we started buying Hoosiers, and of course that's the lowest investment you can make for the biggest return on your money was having a set of Hoosiers. So we take off the street tires and wheels, and we put on the Hoosiers, and we were flying that, man. We had a great time.
Yeah.
So I did that for about 5 years and then was invited to instruct, which I did. I think it was only a year later it was PCA's second year of starting their races. They were bringing one to Mid-Ohio in the second year, and so I jumped in on that. And I'll be honest with you, it scared the crap out of me. I was a pretty good track driver, I thought. Did a Thursday, Friday driver's ed, was solo. And at one point, one of the guys who was racing and had raced previously got in the car with me. And he said, let me just show you, some things. So we'd be going down the end of the straightaway and right-hand turn. Of course, in driver's ed, you're on the far outside. You do a nice apex to clip the corner to the inside, back to the outside. And he said, okay, now here's what I want you to do. He says, move to the middle, move to the middle, move to the middle. I'm like, what am I doing? He goes, well, you got a car on the side of you over there. Just pretend there's a car sitting over there. And now you got to take this corner in the middle of the track. And I'm like, holy cow, this is a whole new ball game.
Wow.
And his instruction was good. It was an eye opener, right? Like, you're not going to be out here alone, dummy. It was a heck of a lot of fun. I did that for 15 years. And it was just a lot of fun. And you got to know a whole different group of guys, and the camaraderie was great, and the friendship was great, and you didn't bend metal. They had a 13-13 rule that was taken from vintage racing. And so, for those that don't know what that is, if you are in an accident or cause an accident, you're on probation for 13 months. If in that 13 months you have an accident or cause an accident, then you're out for 13 months. And so they call it the 13-13 rule. And for people who are trying to collect points in SVRA and other vintage racing forms, sitting out for a year or 13 months would pretty much take you out of competition. It was cool. It was a great event. I remember one race. So I had 911 Carrera, right? And we were grouped with 944 turbos. Well, I think those were the two cars that Porsche made the most models of any car in their lineup, those two cars. Our class was an E class. And I remember once we had 54 cars in our race, and I qualified 27th out of 54. So I'm dead in the middle of these 54 at the start. And we did flying starts. You had a pace car, and he'd pull off, and then you get the green. And one race at Mid-Ohio, there were 4 of us. I happened to be in the lead of the 4, and I knew 2 of the guys behind me were really good buddies from Indianapolis. But there were 4 of us duking it out for 20 minutes of the half-hour race. Your transponder is located in your front, underneath the car, in your front bumper, more or less. So you try to get it as far forward in the car as you can, right, to go across the line.
Right.
And when the 4 of us went around that last corner onto the straightaway, we were 2 by 2, 2 sideways and 2 deep. And from the first car to the 4th car, the delta was 1/2 second.
Wow.
Yeah. So 4, and we've been doing that for 20 minutes, so it was that kind of stuff. It was a great race, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was always the fun thing I found about racing, and I'm still out there riding around with Brock Yates Jr. on one lap every year. There's something about racing that even though you're competing, you never want to see anybody go home. So if somebody's broken, they have a part they need, everybody's rushing over there to try to get that car fixed because No even
doubt.
though they might beat you, you want them in the race. It was always
No
fun.
doubt. It was great. And when I got my boys into it, that was one of the things that there were two things I told my wife that I was trying to teach them. One, to be able to make split-second decisions. There's a saying, what is it? The slower you go, the faster you are. And when they go, it means mentally, the slower you go. Like slow everything down mentally, and you'll be really quick on the track, right?
Right.
I wanted them as young 17, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds to be able to make fast decisions, which you have to do on the track. Yeah. The other thing, because 95% of your time is not on the track, right? It's off the track, and you're working on your car or whatever. Or I remember once we were up at Gingerman, and one of my boys lost part of an exhaust system, and he had to get it welded before we raced the next morning. So there was a guy there, a little shop, and I said, Reed, get over there. We had a little scooter. He took the scooter over and talked to the guy, and I didn't go with my boys on his errands. I made them do it. People loved having a 17-year-old come to him and talk about his problem and can you help me out, and here's the car and everything. And they grew up, I think, in many ways because of PCA racing.
Yeah, for sure. Any of them still doing track days or racing or doing anything?
No, they're both raising families. Eric had a 73 911E. That was pretty cool, and we ended up putting steel flares on it. A guy over in Indianapolis put the wider steel flares on it for us, which gave us the ability to put bigger wheels and tires on it. He was pretty quick. And then Reed, my other son, came along, and he had an 83 911 Carrera, but it was the Euro version. Bought it from one of my friends up in Columbus. It was a fast car to begin with, and we did some work to it. All these cars had roll bars. Oh, not roll bar, full roll cages, actually. I was convinced that the tracks we raced on were pretty safe. I mean, I never went to Road America because I didn't want my boys going that fast for that long and into a corner at 120. I mean, at Mid-Ohio, we saw 120 or maybe 125, maybe. But by and large, it was a lot of shifting, going through 15 corners. And that was really cool,
Yeah.
And so, so those three cars, and we had them liveried the same. One was red, one was white. The 3911 was white, and the 83 was dark green. But then we had yellow headers over the windshield, top and back, and yellow bumpers front and rear. And our numbers were pretty much looked the same, so people knew who we were. There's the Koehlers out there, running around. It was just it was a prideful thing to be, dragging. We had open trailers, and be dragging these things around the countryside. I think we went to 13 different tracks, I think, throughout the Midwest.
Wow.
And we went to Daytona. We went to Daytona 2 or 3 times. That was cool. We had our cars hauled down for that, and we would fly down. We thought we were big stuff when we were flying down, But,
yeah, for sure. Yeah. Cars get there and you fly in, right?
Yeah. That was the only place we did that. Everything else, we were from Watkins Glen to Putnam Park up into Michigan. Yeah, we had a great time.
Yeah, I always tell people until you experience a racetrack early in the morning, beautiful morning, you just really haven't experienced it yet. So
Right.
Yeah, it's fun to me. Hey, we talked a little bit about my next questions, and we talked about we're going to combine those two. I always ask the question, if you could go on a road trip with anybody living or dead, who would it be? Where would you go? Going to maybe combine yours with the bucket list. I think that's what you told me. Yeah, tell me about that. I've been waiting on the answer to this ever since you emailed me and said, I got a great answer for that. And I'm like, oh, great.
As the president of Architects Plus, and CEO, I was in a CEO roundtable for probably 15 years. And at one point, the gentleman who ran it for us, his name was Joe Fessler, he invited us down to his farm in Kentucky, Bracken County, Kentucky. Beautiful little place down there. And one of the things we did while we were down there was he said, I want you to write down who you would like to have lunch or dinner with. And it can't be somebody that's dead. It can't be John Kennedy. It's got to be somebody that's alive. Who would you like to meet and spend time with? And I wrote down Bobby Rahal.
Nice.
Bobby Rahal, for me, he took his passion, racing, right, and turned it into his avocation. That is something that only a few lucky people in this world get to do, really.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I came back from that event, and I told that same story that I just told you on 2 or 3 different occasions. And my oldest son, Eric, was within earshot a couple of those times. So unbeknownst to me, he calls up to Rahal and says, hey, my dad is enamored of Bobby Rahal and blah, blah, blah. And he does his little sales pitch on him. And would there be a chance we could meet him? And the woman's like, sure. She got Bobby, called back, said, yeah, we can arrange this. So we're at a party, Dan, and I'm telling this story for the, sixth time.
Right.
And Eric said, well, this is like a Saturday night. So at the end of my story, Eric said, well, we're going to meet him on Wednesday. I said, what? He said, yeah, we've got a meeting with Bobby Rahal on Wednesday. So Reed was going to Wittenberg at the time. So Reed and Eric and I go up to Columbus. We meet Bobby Rahal at a shop. He comes down. He's about my age, maybe a year older. He went to Denison, where my sister and brother-in-law went. My brother-in-law is a car guy. He would tell me about Bobby had a BMW 2002. And he said, Rick, on Thursday nights, you'd see this BMW 2002 bumping out of, going out of Denison, the headlights, going. And he said, late Sunday night, you'd see it come back, rolling back into town, into Denison. So I meet Bobby Rahal. He said, I'm not sure why we're meeting. I told him the story. He goes, okay, great. Sounds good. He goes, I got 20 minutes, half an hour. I said, that's great. And literally an hour and a half later, he has shown us through every square inch of his building, all his buildings. We're taking covers off all his old race cars, pulling them back. I raced this one at this racetrack and I raced this one at this racetrack, He had two buildings at the time. They were separated by maybe 50 yards. They're on the Beltway around the north end of Columbus, 470 up there. He spent an hour and a half with the three of us. We nicknamed ourselves, my three sons, myself, we called ourselves the Four Pistons. So we had baseball hats, we had golf shirts, we had everything that said the Four Pistons on it, So I took him some of our swag, a shirt and a hat and stuff. And he said, what's this? I said, oh, just something to remember us by, when you're out cutting the grass. And I'm sure Bobby Rahal isn't cutting his own grass, but he's like, oh, come here. So he walks back this hallway. We're about to leave, right? He walks us back this hallway, and we go into this walk-in closet that's 15 by 15. They had all kinds of swag in there, of his place, and he's handing us shirts and hats and everything, Rahal, racing on it and that kind of stuff. So it was just a very cool experience. He spent a lot of time with us. When he realized we were car guys and that we raced both, he, I think it hit a soft spot with him, and all of a sudden he wasn't in a rush to get back to his desk. And it's something I'll never forget. And, something that I'll always remember, to be thankful to Eric for having set that up. I had no plans to do it on my own. That's
so fun.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, and I think once you get into those conversations with people like that and they realize you're not some crazed fan, they really connect with you.
Yeah. Exactly.
We had that same opportunity. Henry ran with Bertil Roos a bunch of times in the open wheel, and we showed up for the enduro race in 2013, which was each driver got 45 minutes and practice and qualifying and all that. And I walk up that morning, and Dennis, who ran Bertil Roos, he hadn't said who we're teamed up with. You just kind of show up and they team you up.
Yeah.
I'm walking up, and it's John Andretti is standing there. And I'm like, what do I do here? Because I don't want to kind of lose it in front of him. So we were just kind of nonchalant, introduced ourselves. And of course, I knew who he was. And we we were teamed up with his son, Jarrett. And they were just some of the nicest people. We went to dinner with them. We spent time with them. Of course, John has since passed on. But it was just fun. And I think once you engage people like that, like you did with Bobby and I did with John, it's just great. It's a great conversation.
Exactly. And like you said, once they realize you're not some crazy, nutbag or something, and that you're genuine about what it is and you have a passion for it, they buy into it as well, right? Because that's what they as well. Yeah, it becomes something that you share, can tell stories about both ways.
Yeah. So what else is on your bucket list? That was obviously a big bucket list item for you. What else you got on that list that's
well, one was when I turned 60, I said to my wife, I don't want any more stuff, don't buy me any more sweaters or, how much stuff can you have in life, and I just wanted to do things, and they weren't necessarily bucket list things, but, I got a fly fishing lesson. I'd never fly fished before. I always wanted to try that. And I got to take off and land in a seaplane from water. I always wanted to try that. But one of the things I got to do, I think it was actually a gift from my parents, was go out. They arranged a boat. It's a 36-foot fountain. Had two 400 horsepower inboard engines, 800 horsepower. And we got to go out on Lake Michigan on a very, very calm day for Lake Michigan. And we hit 72 miles an hour in this 36-foot boat. And then when we got back into Lake Charlevoix, which is also a pretty long lake, he let me drive it there. And it was all you could do to keep your sunglasses on. I mean, everything had to be strapped down. You don't sit in those boats, you stand.
Yeah, sure.
In fact, the seats, there's 2 bucket seats in front and then a bench seat in back. We had 2 other people that they had to stand and hold on to the stainless steel bar behind the front seats. And then the front seats have 2 buttons built into the armrest. One of them raises the floor, if you will, the floor being on a 45-degree angle in front of you. So because you're going to stand on that 45 degrees, right, and lean into this thing.
Okay.
And then the other one drops the seat from horizontal to vertical, drops the seat totally away. So you're just laying against the back of the seat with your feet on this 45-degree floor, if you will, in front of you. And that's what those 2 controls are for. So that was a bucket list item that was really cool. Yeah. We were probably out total of, hour and a half or something. But when you're going 70 miles an hour and you've gone 10 minutes, you're pretty far out,
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. Well, that's about all I had for our little road trip. We'll pretend we're driving back into Terrace Park and I'm dropping you off. But I like to close these up by saying, hey, I always say, if you want people to find you, where do they find you? And, how do they connect with you, particularly
Sure.
on your art?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. So Rick Koehler Art, RICK, and the last name is KOEHLER, RickKoehlerArt.com. You can go to my website and see what I do. I've got upcoming shows, but I think by the time this drops, my shows will have come and gone. I always have art on the website, and I do commissions for people as well. So if anyone's out there and would love to talk to me about art, I would love to talk to them as well. It's my new passion.
Okay. Well, hey, Rick, I really appreciate it. We have a long-time friendship. We don't see each other very often, but I really am thankful for your time today and hope you have a great rest of the year.
We're going to have to change that, aren't we? I'd like to see the 2 of us see each other more often, for sure.
Yeah, well, oddly, we I think it was about a year ago, we met up in Wendy's freaky meetup in Mason, Ohio. So that was fun. That was a highlight of the day.
Right.
All right.
I'm going to pick you up my little Mercedes 280 SL sometime, and then we'll tool around and find a place to eat lunch.
That sounds good. All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye now.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Dan the Road Trip Guy, and we look forward to having you back again next time. In the meantime, if you want to find me, you can find me on the internet at Danny, D-A-N-N-Y, Neal, Neal.com. Until we meet up again, keep having conversations and keep driving.